So ASA, it's a game we all know, and in my opinion it's probably not my preference compared to the base game, but I know a lot of you out there like it. Sadly, this isn't the video for you though, as I'm just going to go with 5 problems I have with ASA. In no particular order. The one at number 1 isn't necessarily more important than the one at number 5. Just 5 talking points about what I think ASA possibly could have done better. So let's get into the first one, which is a little nag from me. And I don't know if you console players know as much about anti-aliasing as us PC players out there, but there are so many different types, from TAA to SMAA, and just the list goes on. I'm not even going to bother to read all of them out. Essentially, the anti-aliasing used on ASA is really not nice in my opinion. It's some form of TAA, and it just adds a sort of muddiness to the image. With frame generation and things like that and DLSS on, it doesn't help anymore, but still I think even with none of that on, the game's visual clarity isn't as it should be, at least on PC. I haven't had any console experience, so I can't say for you console players. In the trailers it looks all really nice, but when you're playing the game there's a lack of clarity around those edges, and it sort of looks a bit smudgy and a bit muddy. For reference, I am playing at 1440p and not playing at a low resolution. I've got an RTX 3090 in my hands, and I do play with frame generation and DLSS, but even when I turn them off, the issue is still there and still persisting. So, you know, I don't really know the reason behind it, but I do think if Wildcard integrated some better anti-aliasing, it may be better for the game. Next up, we have got ourselves the Pyromane, and I have big issues with this. Now, some people love the Pyromane, and for them, great, and I admit it is a great creature, or at least it looks to be a great creature. I refuse to use it, and I'm never going to use one because I'm completely against the fact that it is a paid creature. I already wasn't a fan of the away store being locked behind Bob's Tall Tales, but at least you still got Bob's Tall Tales with it, so it was less of an issue in my opinion. But the Pyromane is just a creature just on its own, and that is all it is, and I'm just so sick of it, and it feels so sick to me that this actually happened. And it's probably the most controversial thing from my point of view that's happened in ASA's journey so far, to some extent, because it really has divided. I don't think there should be a creature that's just locked behind a paywall. It should all be behind skill, and not who has money in their pocket or who actually wants to shell out more money for a better creature, because after all, you're paying for the base game anyway. And Snail Games, although you know it's going under at this point, still wants as much money as possible from you, and it really doesn't sit right with me. And I don't think that the Pyromane was a good move at all for ASA, and it was one of the main reasons actually why I stopped playing, sort of out of protest on ASA, because it's just like, no, the Pyromane is just one step too far. I am not going to deal with that. Now, a lot of you may like it, and you are happy to agree or disagree with these issues that I am posing, because they may not be issues for you, they're just issues for me. As always, feel free just for a little bit of a debate and discussion, but do keep it generally concise and generally neutral. Express your opinion, but don't be mean or anything like that, because we don't want any of that in the comment section. We are a community after all, and we should all be respectful of each other's opinions. So continuing on, we have got map details. This is more prevalent on Scorched Earth, as a lot of the just general ruins on Scorched Earth have had a lot of lost detail, especially near that cave where you have to go into the church. If you compare them between ASA and ASE, there is a massive amount of detail lost. And although the maps do look detailed from the face of it, there is a lot that has been rushed and just skipped around, and it is a little bit of a shame in my opinion. But you know, that's just the way it is, I guess. But, you know, considering all of this, I do think a little bit of time could have been spent on these maps, a little bit more time, I should say, because time definitely has been spent and effort definitely has been put in. But I do think there's a very, very evident amount of rushing in this game. Still, with all the new maps coming out, Av does have a little bit of that as well, and Scorched Earth is just the one which I think is most notable, so that's why I put that here. Now, quite the controversial one is all the issues with Nitrado and you not being able to run your own servers and then you having to use their servers. This was a big issue for server runners, and although I'm not a server runner myself, this really did hit hard for me, as I was like, really, is this what we're stooping down to? It just seemed like an all new low that hadn't been reached before, and it was like, how is this even just happening? And although the situation is getting there and is largely resolved to some extent, the damage has still been dealt and the trust in a lot of players has been lost. And it even got players like Neddy the Noodle, for some reason I couldn't say that, but Neddy the Noodle was, you know, gonna leave the game unless they did this, and he sort of has to some extent. There have been a lot of issues in the Ark community to do with this Nitrado issue. It was the same with Snail Games, like banning people on PvP servers or whatnot in ASA as well. That was completely unacceptable. There's just been some not very nice things coming from Nitrado, and then also they got rid of their whole Spanish audience as well. So I don't know if it's to do with money issues, but most likely it is. I still think it is unacceptable though. And finally, my last point is the characters and UI. And I don't know what it is for me, but I really don't like the Ark characters in Ark Survival Ascended. Again, it's a little nag to end on, but the characters just look a little bit goofy and cartoonish for me compared to the characters that you'd see in Survival Evolved. I think they would have transferred over a lot better. Again, leave your thoughts on this, because after all, these are my opinions and not yours. Also, I think the UI in ASE is just better. I think there's just more clarity based on the specimen implant. Not really quite a fan of it as much in ASA. But there isn't too much difference. It is definitely little nags after little nags. But yeah, that is my last point, and that does wrap up my little ranty rant of the 5 things that I think ASA could have done better, and, you know, maybe I would have still been playing the game if it kept this, but I probably will go back to it within the coming months or years even. Have you ever wondered that when you started Ark, if you knew a little bit more, would your experience have been a little bit better? Well, in today's video, I'm giving you 10 things that I wish I knew when I started playing Ark Survival Evolved, because there's a lot. In at the number 10 spot, we have got narco berries, and what I mean by this is you can use narco berries to keep creatures asleep. I didn't know about narco berries or narcotics. The only thing that I really knew is you punch a dinosaur and you knock it out, and then you chuck whatever berries in it, and then boom, see if it tames. And I was really wondering about this torpor thing, and I noticed by punching it, the torpor went back up. But, you know, I didn't know anything about taming effectiveness back then. It's not great for taming effectiveness at all, and narco berries are a quick, dirty, and easy way, obviously, to get all of that nitty-gritty done with the torpor. You can just get it back up without losing any taming effectiveness. Really, you will lose some of it, because obviously with further consumption you'll lose a little bit, but it's so negligible. It is totally fine to use those narco berries. If you've got narcotics, that's great, but I didn't know about those either. Now, continuing on with the berries, stim berries. And often I would run out of stamina in the most crucial moments. I'm sure it's all happened to us. There's a raptor chasing after us and we're running away from them, and we just run out of stamina and die. Well, if you keep stim berries in your hotbar, you can nom down on those, and then you can keep your stamina up. Yes, your water will go down, but in a very serious situation, it really does work effectively. And if I knew about that, I could have saved myself a heck of a lot of deaths when I started playing the game. Namely to raptors, because they are really, really annoying on the island when you're just going around the beaches and there's some raptors. Metal ore. This one sounds a little bit weird maybe, but I didn't know what metal ore was when I started playing the game. So I just mined loads and loads of rocks with my stone pickaxe until I got metal, and that's how I thought you did it. And it just took me hours and hours and hours to get anything done with metal tools. Then I discovered metal ore, and I just realized absolutely how stupid I've been. But, you know, to my credit, they're usually up in the mountains, and I was up in the north where I started. I think I started North Zone 2 on the island, so it was a little bit out of the way, but still, I could have also done river rocks as well. That's another thing I didn't know about. But any kind of different rock apart from stone, but metal ore especially, if I knew about that, that would have saved me a lot of time in the early days when I just thought, oh, the only way to get metal is just by mining these rocks. I didn't even think to look it up. In number 7, I've got an interesting one, but I'm sure most of us did it when we were at the start of the game. If you know survival games, and obviously Ark's a survival game, survival sandbox game, you can't drink seawater in most survival games. You have to purify it on any kind of fire. You have to boil the water and get it out. Raft is a great example. Here's a clip of just some water being distilled. I think that's the word for it in Raft. You don't have to do that in Ark, and I did not know that. So I spent ages looking for little pockets of water, and there are a few. There's one in that sort of, I can't remember what it's called. I always call it the compound because Ballistic Squid called it that. There's one up in the north section. It'll be on screen, and there's another one as well. I'll point arrows to both. I spent ages looking for those, and I did not realize that you could literally just drink the seawater. It doesn't make much sense, but you can do it, and I really wish I knew that when I was playing the game for the first time. Passive taming. Now, I knew about knockout tames because I've seen a few things on Ark, especially. I started to watch Ballistic Squid series as well, because I was like, I'm playing this game. Why not watch his series? If you haven't watched it either, it is a really great one. There are 50 episodes to binge through, and it is truly a great series. I will leave a link to that in the description below if I actually remember to do that. But yes, I really did not know about passive taming at all. I would just knock out creatures, and when the Ichthyosaurus came out, I had no idea how to tame it, and I spent hours just knocking them out and wondering, why can't I put stuff in this? Like, why can't I feed this? And then I learned about passive tames and how passive taming works. And, you know, now it's second nature, but back then, especially when passive tames were they weren't common, to say the least. I think the Ichthyosaurus was the first one to introduce it. It really, really did help to know what passive tames were, because I just knew knockout tames. You just knock something out, and I'm sure that's what most of us would be thinking, and, you know, I followed a similar trail of thought. Beaver dams. I know it was a little bit later, but still, I really, really, really just hated gathering cementing paste, and I was like, there must be a better way to gather this, and I didn't even bother to look it up. I just kept playing the game as normal and getting loads of stone and loads of chitin or keratin in a mortar and pestle. Took ages to craft, and then obviously when the Casteroides came out, I still did nothing. And then I learned about beaver dams and all the cement paste in beaver dams. You can also get rare flowers, rare mushrooms, and tons of wood if you want that too. Although usually I don't get the wood, I just drop it out of my inventory because most times you'll get quite encumbered. But yeah, getting cementing paste from beaver dams is so much easier than the traditional method of literally just stone, chitin, keratin. That used to be the only way that you could do it, as far as I'm concerned, in the mortar and pestle. But when the Casteroides happened, then there was a much better way to do things, and I really just had an absolute brain melt moment when I learned this. Now, another thing that I didn't learn in at number 4 spot is knockouts can be done with a club. Okay, I just used my fists and the slingshot. I didn't know that the club would knock things out, and I think that makes me look a little bit stupid, and I'll admit that too, because surely a club, you hit something over the head with a club, it gets knocked out. But I was just using slingshots, and, you know, the slingshot's fine and it works effectively if you're taming things like club enemies in the early game. But if you want to tame like pteranodons or parasaurs, a club is a much better option. But obviously you can go up to trancaros. It wasn't maybe the biggest thing, but it makes a big difference in the early stages of the game if you've got a club to knock things out. So that's why I put it so high on the list, and I really think if I knew about this sooner, I would have got a lot more taming done in my early days. Dino food preferences is in at the number 3 spot. And, you know, you just assume if it's a carnivore, it eats meat, and if it's a herbivore, it eats berries. I knew nothing about, you know, the way that the food worked and dino food preferences. There will always be kibble, but if you don't have access to kibble, that's fine. Carnivores will generally prefer mutton, and that is the way that I usually go. I'm pretty sure the Thyla prefers cooked food. I hope I'm getting that right. I'll put something on screen if I got that terribly wrong. That would be slightly embarrassing since I played Ark for so long. But yeah, and then for berries, you just chuck whatever berries you want in. I didn't know that Major berries were the preferable one. And then obviously you can grow your own vegetables, and then from that get even better food for those herbivores. But Major berries, I didn't know that they were the best. I just chucked like Tinto berries, and I just chucked all of them in, really. That doesn't make too much difference if you chuck all of them in, but it makes you look like you know what you're doing, and you actually do know what you're doing if you just chuck in the Major berries, and the tames are going to go faster. Then raw meat generally is what you'll be using in the early days for carnivores. That doesn't matter too much, but if you've got prime meat, chuck that in there. And if you've got mutton, even better. When I got to do bosses, I really didn't know what boss dinos to use. And I just went around taming loads of things, and I all brought them in. And I just had a mix and match of all kinds of creatures. And I think I could have used a much better strategy, especially if I knew what the best boss dinos were. We are going back a little bit, so there wasn't as much variety, but still, I probably could have stuck to Rexes or Spinos or Megatheriums and had no trouble, whatever. Especially for the Broodmother, which was the first boss that I ever did. If I knew about all of that, it would have made that less time-consuming for me, because I didn't know how strong the boss would be, and I didn't know what creatures would be good to defeat the boss. So I just assumed, just tame loads of things and see what works. I guess I had Carnos, I had Rexes, I had Dimorphs, I had a few Megatheriums, I had some Pheomias, just loads of stuff that I just chucked in, which was completely unnecessary. And if I knew about what the best boss dinos were, I would have saved myself quite a lot of headache. And in number one, it is bolas, because bolas are just an amazing thing, and I didn't know what they did. I didn't even bother to craft a bola. I was so stupid when I started playing the game. I just didn't even know what it was. Didn't even bother crafting it. Didn't even bother unlocking it. I just was so determined to get the bow and arrow. That was my focus. So I completely skipped it, and taming things like pteranodons or parasaurs even is an absolute headache without a bola. And I made a video like way back on just 5 beginner mistakes, and one of them was not using a bola, and I still stand to this. Please get yourself bolas as soon as possible. And it is the number one thing that I wish I knew as a beginner player when coming to Ark. They are so useful, especially for pteranodons, which are a big step for a beginner. It's going to be your first flying tame. And even a parasaur, your simple berry gatherer, is going to be far easier to tame. Any creature that you can bola will be far easier to tame than if you did not use a bola, unless it's just an insanely slow thing. It's still, you don't have to move as much. Anyway, that is all that I have time for today, and all 10 things. If you didn't agree with my list, comment your 10 down below. This video was also up 24 hours early on the Patreon as well, so if you want to go support me on Patreon, get some early videos. There'll also be a new Ark Let's Play series coming out over the next few weeks on there for the 2 higher tiers. So if you really do want to become a Patreon member and support me, then please do. You're going to get more content like this. You get full uncut versions of the videos, and I think you'll really like it over there. But anyway, that's all I've got for today. And give it up for our patrons, Ekaterina Puchkova and Karina Thorne, Dominic Macy-Jewski, sorry about that name, and everyone else that's on this list. All the people I've mentioned are paid members, and if you feel like that's something you want a shout out at the end of the video, go join the Patreon or become a paid YouTube member.